So you got men making love songs. That ain't strange to you?
Very strange.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
That's crazy.
That's crazy.
Man, you doing it, man. You deserve it, daddy. You putting in that work. Proud of you. I love you. Yeah.
We've all seen the headlines about Michael Jordan's $3.8 billion empire, the private jets, the yachts, the mansions with their own basketball courts and cigar rooms. Hell, the man even owns doors from the Playboy Mansion. But what we haven't seen is the panic unfolding behind those doors right now. Because while the world still worships Air Jordan, his inner circle is allegedly crumbling under the weight of a scandal so dark, so twisted, that even his wife of 13 years is reportedly furious. Not just at the betrayal, but at the sheer audacity of the double life he's been leading. And it all ties back to one name: Diddy. Yes, that Diddy. The man currently sitting in a Brooklyn jail cell convicted of solicitation charges, with a knife allegedly pressed to his throat just last week by a fellow inmate who wanted to send a message. But here's the part no one's talking about yet: the tapes. The alleged recordings from Diddy's infamous freak-off parties, the ones where, according to insiders, some of the biggest names in sports weren't just guests, they were participants. And if the whispers are true, Michael Jordan wasn't just in the room, he was in the footage. Now, let's be clear. This isn't about some wild, consensual bachelor party. We're talking about events so exclusive, so secretive, that attendees allegedly had to sign NDAs just to walk through the door. Events where, according to court documents from Diddy's trial, women were reportedly coerced into performances while male companions were paid to engage with them, all under the watchful eye of cameras rolling in the background. And the kicker? Diddy allegedly kept every second of it. For leverage, for power, for control. Because in his world, power wasn't just about money or fame. It was about having something to hold over the heads of the most powerful men on the planet, men like Jordan, men like LeBron. Men who, up until now, have spent decades crafting images of discipline, of family values, of legends who transcend the game. So, what happens when the king of basketball's darkest secrets start leaking? And what does it say about the men who ruled the game that they were there in the first place?
Hey, everybody know ain't no party like a Diddy party, so.
Yeah, that's what's up. Yeah.
The first red flag came years ago, buried in plain sight. Remember that resurfaced video of LeBron James on Instagram Live, grinning at Diddy and saying, "Ain't no party like a Diddy party"? At the time, it seemed like just another celebrity bromance moment. Harmless, even funny. But now it reads like a confession. Because the parties LeBron was talking about weren't your typical A-list bashes with sparkling drink towers and VIP sections. According to sources tied to Diddy's legal team, these were men-only gatherings where the rules of the outside world didn't apply. Where, as one insider put it, the real action happened after the music stopped. And LeBron wasn't just a one-time guest. Multiple sources claim he was a regular, so much so that when Diddy was first arrested on human trafficking charges back in September 2024, LeBron immediately unfollowed him on social media. Not after the conviction, not after the sentencing. The day the news broke. That's not the move of a guy who just casually knew the host. That's the move of a man who knew exactly what those parties entailed and didn't want to be anywhere near the fallout.
Let's talk about LeBron James, the Lakers head coach, saying he is out for personal reasons. It's an excused absence. However, social media trying to connect it to a resurfaced clip where James joined Diddy Combs on a live stream and said, quote, "Hey, everybody know ain't no party like a Diddy party." I think that went viral. I remember when he said that years ago.
But here's where it gets even messier. Because while LeBron was busy scrubbing his social media, Michael Jordan was allegedly doing something far more desperate: damage control. Insiders close to the Jordan family claim that Yvette Prieto, his wife of over a decade, was furious when she found out about his involvement. Not just because of the parties, but because of the duplicity. This wasn't some one-time mistake, some lapse in judgment at a Vegas after-party. This was a pattern. A double life. One that risked everything they'd built, his brand, his legacy, their marriage. And the worst part? She allegedly only found out because the tapes are out there, floating around, being shopped to journalists, being used as leverage. Because in Diddy's world, nothing was ever just for fun. Everything was transactional. Everything was power. And now, that power is slipping through his fingers, along with the secrets of every man who ever walked into one of his parties thinking they were untouchable.
When it came to the other defense attorneys speaking, Brian Steele was just very urging of the judge to please consider that Sean Combs had untreated trauma throughout his life. Brian Steele urged the judge to consider that Sean Combs had untreated trauma in his life, and that there have been times in Sean Combs' life, especially when he had in his system, that there were times where he had flatlined.
And that's when the silence started to mean something. Because here's what's really telling: none of these men have denied it. Not LeBron, not Jordan, not Magic Johnson, whose name has also been repeatedly tied to Diddy's inner circle. No lawsuits, no cease and desists, no angry tweets calling the rumors fake news. Just radio silence. And in the world of PR crises, silence isn't golden. It's guilty, especially when the man at the center of it all, Diddy, is currently begging a judge for mercy, calling his own actions disgusting, shameful, and sick, while his lawyers scramble to keep the most damning evidence from ever seeing the light of day. Because here's the thing about those tapes. They're not just embarrassing. They're explosive. And the men in them, they're not just athletes. They're icons. The kind of men who sell sneakers and cereal and dreams to little kids. The kind of men who can't afford to have their legacies rewritten in one fell swoop. But the tapes are out there. And the clock is ticking. Now, let's talk about the parties themselves. Because this wasn't just some high-end orgy where everyone had a few too many drinks and made bad decisions. According to testimony from Diddy's trial, these were meticulously planned events where the line between consent and coercion was allegedly blurred beyond recognition.
You gotta really look at what's going on. I've been around him a couple of times. Don't like the guy. And I know a lot of other people who he's done weird things to. And there are several men who have reached out to me telling me that they got their cakes took, basically. They got diddled.
Women were reportedly lured in under false pretenses, told they were attending an exclusive industry mixer only to find themselves in situations where they were pressured into performances while male companions, paid by Diddy, engaged with them on camera. And the guests, they weren't just watching, they were participating. All while Diddy's team allegedly filmed every second, storing the footage in a private vault that, according to sources, he referred to as his insurance policy. Because in his world, blackmail wasn't a last resort. It was the whole point. And that's what makes this scandal different from every other celebrity intimacy tape leak in history. This isn't about a drunk night or a lapse in judgment. This is about a system. A machine designed to trap powerful men in compromising positions, then use those moments to bind them to Diddy's orbit. Need a favor? Need a deal? Need something disappeared? Suddenly, Diddy had the leverage to make it happen. And the men who played along? They weren't just attendees, they were complicit. Because in that room, with the cameras rolling and the sparkling drink flowing, no one was innocent. Not the hosts, not the guests, not even the men we've spent decades putting on pedestals.
You know, I have an obligation to the game of basketball, not financially. I'm okay. I mean, I think more or less from as a basketball player is to be able to pass on messages of success and dedication to the game of basketball.
Still love it?
Love it like you wouldn't believe. I mean, in all honesty, I wish.
Take Michael Jordan, for example, the man who built an empire on control, on the court, in business, in every aspect of his life. The same man who, according to sources, was a fixture at these parties, not just once, not just as a curious bystander, as a participant. And when his wife found out, all hell broke loose. Because this wasn't just about infidelity. This was about betrayal on a cellular level. The man who preaches discipline, who demands perfection, who built a brand on being above the chaos, he was right in the middle of it. And worse, he knew what Diddy was. He knew what those parties were. And he went anyway. Because that's the thing about power. It doesn't just corrupt, it addicts. And once you're in that deep, there's no such thing as too far. But Jordan isn't the only one sweating right now. Because if the tapes are real, and let's be real, at this point, why wouldn't they be? Then we're not just talking about one man's downfall. We're talking about a domino effect. LeBron James, the self-proclaimed king of the NBA, the man who spent his entire career cultivating an image of family-first values, allegedly right there in the mix. Magic Johnson, the smiling, ever-charming businessman who turned his HIV diagnosis into a lesson in responsibility, reportedly a regular at events that make the Playboy Mansion look like a church social. And let's not forget the others, the ones we haven't heard about yet, the ones whose names are still being whispered in back rooms while their PR teams scramble to contain the damage. Because here's the cold, hard truth. In Hollywood, in sports, in the rarefied air where legends live, everyone has a skeleton. But not everyone has a skeleton on tape.
When you start the comparisons, I think it is what it is, you know. It's just a stand-up measurement. You know, I take it with a grain of salt.
And that's what makes this moment so electric. Because right now, somewhere in a vault, or a safe deposit box, or a lawyer's office, or a journalist's inbox, there's footage that could rewrite history. Footage that could turn heroes into hypocrites. Footage that could make the words role model taste like ash in our mouths. And the men who are on it, they know it. Their wives know it. Their teams know it. And the fans, we're about to find out just how much we're willing to forgive when the legends we love turn out to be human after all.
Breaking news, the FBI sweeping in, making more than 30 arrests tonight, including an NBA star and an NBA coach who was coaching a big game just last night. Authorities say all part of a massive NBA and mafia gambling scandal. Investigators say they rigged poker games using high-tech devices, including an X-ray table that could read cards.
But here's the wild part. The tapes aren't even the worst of it. Because while Diddy's legal team is fighting to keep that footage under wraps, there's another battle happening in the shadows. One that involves money, loyalty, and the kind of betrayal that doesn't just end marriages, it ends careers. Remember Damon Jones, LeBron's so-called best friend? The guy who was allegedly selling inside info on LeBron's injuries to gamblers for pocket change? Turns out, he wasn't just some degenerate hanging around at the Aria Casino in Vegas, flashing LeBron's name like a golden ticket. He was connected to the mafia, to rigged poker games, to a betting ring that, according to federal indictments, had its tentacles wrapped around the NBA like a vice. And if you think for 1 second that Damon was working alone, I've got a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you. Because here's the thing about men like Damon Jones. They don't get access to that kind of information, real information, the kind that can swing a $100,000 bet, unless someone lets them have it. And in the NBA, access is everything. It's the difference between sitting courtside and watching from the nosebleeds. It's the difference between a handshake and a hug. Between, hey, what's up, and come on back. Damon didn't just stumble into the Lakers' locker room. He was invited. By LeBron, by the team, by the same people who are now pretending they had no idea what he was up to. And if Damon had that kind of access, who else did? Who else was allegedly feeding info to gamblers, to bookies, to the kind of people who don't just take your money when you lose? They take your kneecaps? Now, let's connect the dots. Because this isn't just about a few bad bets or a guy who couldn't keep his mouth shut. This is about a culture. A culture where the lines between player, coach, and criminal get so blurred you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. Where a man like Diddy, convicted felon, alleged human trafficker, a guy who just got a knife to his throat in prison, can host parties attended by the biggest names in sports, and no one bats an eye. Where a guy like Damon Jones can walk into a casino, drop LeBron's name, and suddenly every door opens. Where the same men who preach about the game and the grind are allegedly involved in schemes that make Tony Soprano look like an amateur. And the fans, we're just supposed to keep buying the jerseys, keep watching the games, keep pretending that the men we idolize are just athletes. But here's the reality. They're not. They're businessmen. And in business, especially the kind that involves billions of dollars and even more ego, everyone has a price. For some, it's money. For others, it's power. And for men like Jordan and LeBron, it was access. Access to the parties. Access to the inner circle. Access to a world where the rules don't apply. Until suddenly, they do. And when that happens, when the house of cards starts to tremble, the first thing they do is cut ties. Unfollow. Distance. Pretend they never knew the guy. But here's the thing about tapes, about texts, about evidence. It doesn't care about your PR strategy. It doesn't care about your legacy. It just is. And right now, it's sitting somewhere waiting to blow the whole thing sky high. And that's when you start to wonder, how many more Damons are out there? How many more best friends with gambling problems and loose lips? How many more unofficial coaches who know where the bodies are buried? Because if Damon Jones could walk into a locker room, into a team plane, into the inner sanctum of the Lakers operation, then this isn't just about one bad apple. This is about a rotten orchard. And the question isn't if more names will drop, it's when. But let's zoom out for a second. Because while we're all focused on the tapes and the bets and the backroom deals, there's a bigger picture here, one that involves billions of dollars, generations of influence, and the very fabric of how we see our heroes. Michael Jordan didn't just sell sneakers. He sold excellence. LeBron doesn't just play basketball. He preaches about responsibility, about using your platform for good. Magic Johnson, the man literally turned "I have HIV" into a business opportunity. These aren't just athletes. They're myths. And myths don't survive scandals like this. They crumble.
It's amazing. You never really know when you're in the prime of your career how much time you really do not have for family. That's what I have time to do now. I mean, the most valuable asset I have is time. Right.
And that's the thing about men like Michael Jordan. They don't just bend the rules, they rewrite them entirely. We've spent decades worshiping the myth of Air Jordan, the relentless competitor, the flawless businessman, the family man who built a $3.8 billion empire on discipline and dominance. But what happens when the man behind the myth starts looking more like a character from a Scorsese movie than a sports legend? Because let's be real, this isn't just about a few wild nights at Diddy's parties. This is about a pattern. A dual life so meticulously crafted that even the people closest to him allegedly had no idea how deep it went. We're talking about a man who preaches perfection, who demands excellence from everyone around him, who built a brand on being above the chaos, only to find out he was knee-deep in it, and not just as a bystander, as a participant. Now, let's paint the picture here. On one side, you've got the Michael Jordan the world knows, the 6-time champion, the sneaker mogul, the guy who turns golf bets into 6-figure spectacles and flies around in a private jet with his logo on the tail. The man who sold his majority stake in the Charlotte Hornets for $3 billion. $3 billion, because he knew exactly when to cash out. The same man who, according to insiders, would allegedly fly into rages if a teammate so much as showed up late to practice. Discipline was his religion. Control was his god. And yet, on the other side, you've got the Jordan who reportedly showed up at Diddy's infamous freak-off parties not once. Not as a curious onlooker, but as a regular. The same parties where, according to court documents, women were allegedly coerced into performances, while male companions engaged with them on camera, all under the watchful eye of a man who treated blackmail like a business strategy. So how do you reconcile those two versions of Michael Jordan? The one who built an empire on precision and the one who allegedly walked into a room where the only rule was that there were no rules.
I would love to see him have a farewell tour, then just walk away, because he's one of the three greatest players I've ever seen after Michael and Kobe. But I don't want to see him just hanging on just for the heck of it.
And here's the kicker. He's not the only one. Because if Jordan's alleged involvement in these parties is shocking, then LeBron James's connection is downright unsettling. This is a man who has spent his entire career cultivating an image of family-first values, of being a role model, of using his platform to speak out on social issues and inspire the next generation. The same LeBron who just a few years ago was allegedly caught on camera saying, "Ain't no party like a Diddy party," with a grin that suggested he wasn't just talking about the music. And let's not forget, this isn't some ancient history. Diddy's legal troubles have been unfolding in real time with his conviction on solicitation charges just last month and his sentencing to over 4 years in prison. So when LeBron immediately unfollowed Diddy on social media the day the arrest news broke, that wasn't just a casual distance taking, that was the move of a man who knew exactly what those parties entailed and didn't want to be anywhere near the blowback. But here's where it gets even more complicated. Because LeBron isn't just any athlete, he's the face of the NBA. The guy who signs lifetime deals with Nike, who invests in media companies and pizza chains and schools. The man who just last week was spotted courtside at a Lakers game in a floral cardigan and his son's college jersey, looking every bit the doting dad. So how does that image square with the alleged reality of him being tied to parties that make the Playboy Mansion look like a church picnic? And more importantly, how does it square with the silence? Because that's the thing that's really telling here. No denials, no lawsuits, no angry statements about fake news. Just nothing. And in the world of PR crises, silence isn't neutral. It's complicit.
I applaud them when they win. I criticize them when they're messing up in an effort to make sure that you don't do it again. I'm not wishing anybody to fail, but I have to call it how I see it because I have an audience to answer to. These players, I don't get paid to talk to you.
And LeBron's not alone. Because if we're talking about men who built empires on one image while allegedly living another, we can't ignore Magic Johnson. The smiling, ever-charming businessman who turned his HIV diagnosis into a lesson in responsibility and resilience. The guy who went from NBA superstar to billionaire investor, with stakes in everything from the Los Angeles Dodgers to Starbucks franchises. The man who, according to multiple sources, was also a fixture at Diddy's parties. Now, Magic has always been the master of reinvention, turning his health struggles into a platform, his business savvy into a brand. But even he can't spin his way out of this one, because when the tapes allegedly start circulating, when the details of what really went on behind those closed doors come to light, no amount of charm or crisis management is going to make this disappear. And that's the thing about legends. They're only as strong as the myths we build around them. Once the myth cracks, the whole thing comes crashing down. So here's the question we all have to ask ourselves. When the truth finally comes out, and let's be real, in a world of leaks and lawsuits and alleged blackmail tapes, are we going to pretend we didn't see it? Are we going to keep buying the jerseys, keep watching the games, keep letting them get away with it? Or are we finally going to admit that the game was rigged from the start? Because the tapes aren't just coming for them. They're coming for all of us. The ones who looked the other way, the ones who bought the myth, the ones who will have to decide when the truth finally comes out if we're still willing to call them heroes. Or if we'll finally admit that the kings of the court were just men all along. And maybe, just maybe, that's the real scandal. Not the parties, not the tapes, but the fact that we let them convince us they were something more. Stay sharp, stay curious, and remember, when the legends fall, it's never just about the crash. It's about who was holding them up in the first place. Until next time.